Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie opens with the entire world watching as an extraterrestrial mothership appears above Johannesburg. People believe it will be the first time they meet aliens. When the military enters the mothership, the creatures exhibit emaciated and ill vital signs. So the Johannesburg government devises a temporary solution for the prawns, a gigantic encampment called District 9, directly below their mothership, to house 1.8 million prawns. Since the administration was unprepared, they erect barriers and arm District 9. However, District 9 gradually degrades into a slum. People speculate about why the mothership cannot function, after discovering footage of the command module falling from the mothership. For years, the government invests money to protect the prawns, which results in a lower priority for the people. Tembisa locals riot in order to get the prawns out of town. They are disgusted, and urge the prawns to leave their world alone. After 20 years, the public puts pressure on the government to move the prawns. As a result, the government engages Multinational United, a weapons manufacturer, to handle the expulsion of the prawns into a new colony, outside of South Africa's cities. The director announces the proposal to his employees at the MNU meeting. They will go to the slums, and have the residents sign a document for an eviction agreement. The bureaucrat's son-in-law is assigned as the field officer to direct the fieldwork in the slum. The bureaucrat's wife displays the handicrafts her husband created for her. Since he believes it is more significant, the bureaucrat makes crafts for gifts. The cameraman follows the bureaucrat around while he works as a field officer. The videographer follows him through the MNU weapons store. When they go to the slums, he records the bureaucrat presenting his assistant and meeting up with other people, including his colleagues and his security guard. Unfortunately, the bureaucrat has a terrible confrontation with the colonel. He simply wishes to condemn the PMC mercenaries for bringing excessive and needless firepower to the battlefield. The colonel taunts him and the cameraman. Later, the mercenaries, accompanied by the bureaucrat and his team, visit the slums. The assistant and security guard and cameraman make up the bureaucrat's crew. Unfortunately, the prawns already attack some mercenaries when they arrive. They knock on many shacks in order to obtain the prawn scribbles on the forms. Some prawns are uncontrollable, while others sign willingly, and make a mess. So far, they have cleared 1,018 forms in District 9, Zone 4. They use cat chow to entice the prawns to sign the forms. Authorities and intellectuals believe the prawns stuck on Earth are workers, in need of higher leadership. Prawns rarely take initiative, because they observe. Residents avoid the prawns, but things are different within the slum. The Nigerian gang takes advantage of the prawns' aimlessness by scamming them, associating themselves with alien weaponry, and even engaging in interspecies hooking. They are led by a disabled but strong gang leader. The bureaucrat and his colleagues crack a joke about not interfering with the gang, or they will be killed. While checking into houses, they come into a hut with 50 prawn eggs. He says that the hanging cow with linked tubes inside the hut provides nutrition to the prawn eggs, and orders the eggs to be burned. When they penetrate other shacks, they discover concealed caches of alien armament. The reality regarding MNU's involvement in the prawn transfer is, it is for the purpose of gathering alien armaments for MNU to use. The confiscated extraterrestrial weapons are delivered to the MNU for testing, and they realize that the arsenal only works when the prawns utilize it, because the technology and weapons only interact with prawn DNA. In the meantime, 3 prawns, Christopher, his young son CJ, and Paul, seek alien fuel in prawn technology at the District 9 dumps. CJ thankfully finds one after 20 years, which delights Christopher. While CJ departs for their home, the 2 aliens return to Paul's cabin. There is a hidden area inside the shed, with a beautifully crafted workstation. The workbench's goal is to convert the collected fluid into gasoline. The fuel is successfully converted and created by the workbench, and it is transferred into a silver cylinder. Unfortunately, the bureaucrat and his squad find their way to the shack. While Paul deals with them, Christopher hides. However, the encounter turns bad, and the security officer confines Paul while the bureaucrat investigates the shack. He locates the cylinder and fidgets with it, until fuel sprays in his face. He quickly orders the cameraman to cease filming, and reappears in front of the camera, this time confiscating the cylinder. They return outside and insult Paul, but Paul hurls the security officer back to his hut, and shoves the bureaucrat into a barrel of fire. The colonel and his mercenaries arrive and completely destroy Paul, and the bureaucrat burns his arm. He lets the medic fix his arm, while remarking on how quickly Paul attacks. They keep collecting sprawls, until they arrive at Christopher's residence. CJ is given candy by the bureaucrat, but he throws it at him. When they become enraged, they decide to check the hut. They uncover monitors and other equipment within. The bureaucrat gags and vomits a lot of fluids while checking. Unfortunately, vomiting is not the only symptom. He also suffers from nail loss, headaches, and nosebleeds. He tries to restrain them, but it only makes matters worse. Christopher and CJ look for the cylinder, but it has vanished. At the Nigerian gang's base, they trade cat food for the prawn's mechanized war gear. However, the gang murders one of the prawn sellers, so that the gang boss might consume its flesh. They believe that eating the prawn's flesh will provide them with healing, and the ability to employ the prawn's weapons. After work, the bureaucrat returns to his home. His wife greets him with a surprise for his promotion. He pretends to be well, but excuses himself to vomit in the restroom. He coughs as they cut the cake, then vomits black fluid onto the food, and collapses. He goes to the hospital in the morning, while his wife waits in the waiting room. The doctor notices his damaged arm morphing into a prawn claw. The doctor quickly summons the MNU military force, and the bureaucrat is placed in a body bag. They transport him to MNU's lab, where they inspect his body. A staff member discovers the cylinder that he confiscated during his tenure in the lab. The bureaucrat attempts to warn them, but no one pays attention. 16 hours later, MNU brutally uses him as a test subject. They force him to utilize the alien weaponry, and they discover that his claw contains the same DNA as a prawn. The researchers, including the director, agree to kill him after the experiment. They must take his organs and blood, while he is still in the metamorphosis stage, in order to use his perfect balance of alien and human DNA in biotech. They can benefit from it. When the bureaucrat hears this, he attacks the researchers, and flees the lab. The director notifies the bureaucrat's wife, his daughter, that he is transforming into a prawn. Then he gets a call from the lab, stating he has fled. He directs the mercenaries to pursue the official alive. Outside, the bureaucrat scavenges food and clothing, hides, and tries to call friends and family for assistance, but nobody cares. When he goes to get food, he hears a slanderous news broadcast on television. He is announced as a wanted fugitive and escapee, who contracted a transmissible sickness after mating with prawns. He hides in District 9 for 31 hours after being exposed, hoping no one will find him. 40 hours after being exposed, he looks for food, and even tries to consume cat food. However, he is unable to digest it, and he receives a call from his wife, who begs him to leave her alone. He tries to defend himself against the lies, but she merely cries, and hangs up the phone. He cuts one of his claws, and suffers the agony that ensues. Suddenly, mercenaries' helicopters hunt him down. He flees and comes to Christopher's cabin, and passes out due to blood loss from the mutilated wound. He wakes up inside the missing command module dropship, which is hidden beneath Christopher's shack. When Christopher wonders where the cylinder is, he explains that it was confiscated by the lab. CJ says that fuel is required to restart the mothership, and Christopher adds that a machine aboard the mothership can even assist the bureaucrat in reverse transmutation. Obtaining the cylinder, on the other hand, is a suicide expedition. 56 hours after being exposed, the bureaucrat's change has reached half his torso. His skin sheds for his body to absorb the change. His wife unexpectedly phones, providing promises, but he has no idea it is a trap set up by the MNU and mercenaries to find his location. CJ admits he misses their planet, and wants to return, but Christopher explains they can't, since they don't have enough fuel, and shows them the new colony promised to them, but the bureaucrat enters and convinces them that they should not move, because it is smaller than the hut, similar to concentration camps. The bureaucrat inquires once more about what will happen if the fuel is recovered, and is reminded by Christopher that there are no firearms. Desperate to return to normalcy, he offers to buy firearms from the Nigerian gang. The next day, he travels to the gang's base to buy alien weaponry, but they treat him aggressively instead. The gang leader even orders that the bureaucrat's claw arm be severed. While attempting to rescue himself, the bureaucrat discovers the extraterrestrial weapons. He instantly grabs an alien sonic gun, and shoots at the gang members, ordering the gang members to bag the weapons for him. The gang leader is interested in obtaining a prawn claw, and threatens the bureaucrat, who is fleeing with the alien weapon, that he will own him one day. When the mercenaries arrive at Christopher's shack, it is deserted. Christopher and the bureaucrat are at the MNU base, breaching to retrieve the cylinder, and successfully obtain it, but Christopher discovers skinned prawns, including Paul, for brutal research. While the arrived mercenaries begin firing in the lab, he stares dumbfoundedly at his dead kind. The bureaucrat orders Christopher to remember his son while firing at the mercenaries, who explode when hit by the extraterrestrial weapons. Christopher returns to reality, and constructs a bomb out of scraps in the lab, detonating it against the wall. They take an MNU car, and drive to the slums. The colonel and his mercenaries pursue them. When CJ arrives at Christopher's shack, he swiftly hands him the cylinder that will power the dropship below. Christopher concedes that they will have to wait 3 years before they can cure the bureaucrat and spare the prawns from the tests. The bureaucrat, enraged, knocks down Christopher and abandons the hut, descending into the dropship. CJ inserts the cylinder, and the entire dropship comes to life. While the colonel arrives at the hut and discovers Christopher inside, the bureaucrat attempts to activate the dropship. He threatens Christopher, talking about how much he enjoys seeing prawns die, but the ground shakes, and they flee the hut, watching the dropship sway in the air. The colonel orders the dropship to be fired, and one of its engines is immediately destroyed by a missile. Christopher collapses to his knees as his dropship crashes, knowing that getting home is now impossible. The colonel and mercenaries imprison Christopher, and seize the bureaucrat from the dropship, loading him into their car. The Nigerian gang unexpectedly ambushes the mercenary convoy, crashing with their vehicles. The gang fights them to take the bureaucrat hostage, leaving Christopher, who is hiding on the dropship, to manipulate a button to reactivate the mothership. The gang executes a ritual, and chops off the hostage's prawn hand. In the meantime, CJ, remaining on the dropship, successfully activates the mothership and all prawn technology, including the prawn combat suit hidden in the gang's base. The suit scans the base, identifying the bureaucrat as a friend and the gang members as foes, and kills every member of the gang. While the mercenaries outside the base question Christopher about the resurrected mothership, he remains silent. A mercenary unit smokes out the bureaucrat, who is hiding in the gang's hideout. He has no choice but to put on the costume. He departs the base wearing his armored gear, and notices the mercenaries who are taking Christopher hostage. He first displays little concern and even exchanges Christopher for his release, until he hears the colonel order his mercenaries to murder Christopher. The bureaucrat returns to Christopher, executing the mercenaries. The two sprint to the dropship, as more mercenaries arrive to shoot them. The bureaucrat stays behind to save Christopher time, who wants to invite the bureaucrat along, but he knows someone has to keep the mercenaries at bay. He tells the bureaucrat that he will come in 3 years to cure and restore him to his normal self. The bureaucrat kills every mercenary who shoots at his suit, and blood smears the ground. Christopher eventually orders the mothership to extract the dropship from the ground. A tractor beam emerges from the mothership's core, lifting the dropship higher. The colonel notices and orders another missile to be fired, but the bureaucrat grabs the missile, that explodes, shattering the suit's left arm, but luckily preserving his hand. The colonel is enraged as the dropship successfully rejoins the mothership, and vents his rage by causing the battle suit the bureaucrat is wearing to malfunction. The bureaucrat crawls away from the suit, 74 hours after being exposed. Like the prawns, his left eye is swollen and yellow. The colonel corners the bureaucrat and points a gun at his head. The prawn slum suddenly surrounds the colonel, and mobs him, tearing his corpse apart to eat. The people celebrate, as the mothership departs Earth. Then the bureaucrat's assistant reveals MNU's illicit genetic research program. Following the resettlement, the government relocates the 2.5 million foreigners to District 10, and demolishes District 9. The bureaucrat has completely turned into a prawn at the landfill, creating a metal flower for his wife. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.